For background, I'm a fairly fit 22-year-old female. I work for a pretty well-known health club in the northwest of England, and I've been on a pretty simple path of self-improvement whilst working part-time and studying at university. Therefore, when my manager asked me if I wanted to do a lifeguard qualification for our poolside, I happily agreed. I mean, it was an all-expense-paid trip, so I never would have said no anyway. They paid for my travel, about an hour away from where I was living, but a drive anyway, so they just paid my petrol. With the hotel, the food, and the course, which was pretty cool, I thought. The way the course was set out was pretty normal for a lifeguard course, I assume. It was 3 days worth of training, 4 days off, and I returned back home to work, and then I would travel back again for 3 more days, on the 3rd day graduating from the course and becoming an official lifeguard. The first 3 days, they were amazing, and I found my hotel pretty easily, and although it was in a dodgy-looking area, I did sleep well, and the staff were nothing but helpful. In fact, I was hoping to return to the same hotel for my last 3 days. However, the day before I was due to return to my last 3 days, my manager told me that the hotel was fully booked. He quickly booked me another one, which was in the middle of the town centre, and I looked the hotel up and the exterior was dodgy, but I thought I may as well give it a chance, as it was only for 2 nights anyway. I went to my first day at lifeguard training as normal when one of the local girls told me that the hotel that I was about to stay at had no on-site parking. She also mentioned that all the surrounding car parks were only for short stays, a maximum 2 hours, and it would just be best to leave my car at the training center, and she would take me to my hotel and pick me up in the morning to go to training and stuff. I thought that this was really helpful and thanked her and took her up on her offer. After finishing for the day, I got into a car and she took me to my hotel. She also mentioned that she used to rent near this hotel, which was a small family-run business and not a chain. It had no room service and nor any kitchen, and therefore pointed me in the right direction to Sainsbury's, a McDonald's and Subway, which was perfect. So, night 1 in the hotel. I walked into the hotel and the lobby seemed nice, although there was some construction in all the surrounding rooms, I must admit. The girl at the front desk, blonde hair, blue eyes, greeted me and began to check me in. She smiled and let me know that I'd been upgraded, but she didn't know why. I didn't question it because I was just happy to be in the executive suite. She walked me to my room, which was like a maze. In fact, you needed a special keycard to get to my set of rooms, the executive suites. This meant that no random people could just walk through the hallway near my room, and I felt pretty safe because of that. Upon entering the room, I was really amazed. I have never been in something so classy in my entire life. The room was massive, and on the left, there were stairs to the bathroom. Stairs. There was a balcony, a queen-size bed, a couch, TV with Netflix, and a table full of complimentary water, tea, and biscuits. Well, I chilled for a bit, and then I suddenly realized just how hungry I was and thought that I should nip to Sainsbury's before it got dark outside, and honestly, all was good. On the way back from the shop was when it all started to get really weird. I returned to the hotel and got to the door, which needed the special key to open the doors for the executive suites. And there was a man just stood outside, dressed in a suit. We looked at each other for a moment before I walked past and scanned the door open. I automatically regretted it too, because the man followed me through, very closely too. Now, I'm usually a pretty nervous person at the best of times, and I panic at just about anything. It drives people crazy, and of course, I panicked at this. I thought to myself, better safe than sorry, and literally just ran to my room. Maybe I look like a crazy person, but whatever. However, I turned my head slightly to see that the man had actually kept up to me, really well too. I started to cry a little bit and opened my door extremely clumsily, threw myself in and slammed the door closed. The weirdest bit was that the man actually looked as though he was about to walk into my bedroom. It was just really weird. Now, you're probably thinking, why didn't you call the front desk? And truth is, I don't know why. Maybe I should have, but with how the story progresses, I know I did the right thing by not calling the front desk. I'll explain, don't worry. So I eventually calmed myself down and thought about running myself a bath before Love Island started at 9 p.m. I ran the bath and stripped naked and sat on the toilet. I left the bathroom door wide open because, I was in a nice hotel room and why not, right? I had a very clear view of the front door, and as I stand up to flush, I hear a noise, like the sound of the front door opening. I look up to see that it has opened. I ran to the bathroom door and slammed it shut and locked it, and I just sank to the floor and began sobbing. I turned the bath off so I could listen closely to the room outside the door, but didn't hear anything. I messaged my best friend who lives in Crete, so even if something did happen, she wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. In fact, I don't even know why I did this. I just thought that there was no way that this was actually happening, and if I called the police, I would just be laughed at. But I sat there on the floor for half an hour till my friend convinced me that it was all just in my head and to check. I let her know my hotel name and room number, just in case, and told her that if I didn't reply in 5 minutes, no matter what, to call the police for me. So she agreed and I left the bathroom. When I got out there, all looked really normal. I checked under the bed, the balcony, the wardrobe, and everything was fine. No masked murderers, although I tried the lock to the front door with the manual lock that are normally on hotel room doors, but found that there just wasn't one, and this freaked me out a bit, but I just kind of laughed at myself, grabbed one of the 2 bottles of free water and downed it during Love Island and just fell asleep soundly. When I woke up the next day, I got ready quickly because I overslept and grabbed the last bottle of water off the desk and ran to meet the girl who was picking me up for training. And I just forgot all about the night events. But the last night at the hotel, now here's where shit gets weird. I come back relatively early to revise for the assessment the next day, and it was about 30 degrees outside, and inside, mind you, because the room was unair conditioned. So I stripped down to my underwear, and I noticed that the non-complimentary waters had been restocked, so I assumed it was maybe just the one-off, considering I didn't pay full price for the room or anything. I revised for maybe 30 minutes, but the heat made me kind of sleepy. And I don't even remember falling asleep, but I do remember the sound of the door next to me slam shut. The front door. I felt groggy and didn't open my eyes straight away, but when I did, it took my eyes a few seconds to adjust. I brushed it off quickly until I sat upright and my eyes focused on the table, which was now full of complimentary water, and it definitely was not there before. And next to me, in a bed, there was a random sock, a black ankle sock that was definitely not mine. One of my socks that I had put into a pair was no longer on the floor too, but had gone missing altogether. Like someone had taken off their own sock and put on mine or something. My mind automatically thought that it just had to be the staff, and therefore I didn't complain to management. I mean, this was not a chain hotel where a creepy employee just couldn't be held accountable, but a family-run business. What if I complained to the creep that had been doing this? So I barricaded myself in the room and just barely slept that night. Upon checkout, an elderly man was at the desk who I'd only ever seen in passing. He asked if I liked my room, and I tried to be polite and just told him yes, despite the weird events, which I began to question myself about again. He told me that the manager had rang the day before I arrived, and he decided to give me a quiet room to myself, which he likes to do for the younger girls. He then asked me to leave them a good review. I began to feel a little bit uneasy again for some reason, but I had my lifeguard assessment that day and pushed it to the back of my mind. I passed with flying colours and drove home, and it wasn't until I sat in my own bed that the situation, it really hit me. Something just wasn't sitting right with me. So I went into the hotel's TripAdvisor, and it's something I should have done in the first place, I know. Or my manager should have done it at least when sending a young girl alone somewhere. And there were 3 separate reviews. Out of the 4 reviews that I bothered to read, feeling too sick to continue, 3 contained a warning to women. Apparently, men were trying to get into their rooms, and staff would just walk in unannounced. And even when they were confronted, the staff would deny it. This is when I knew that I had not made up what had happened in my head. A people or a person had been coming into my room whilst I slept and whilst I was half naked, and stayed for an unknown period of time, stealing my clothing. I let my managers know, who made an official complaint against the company, but so far, nothing has come back. And I don't know what else to do about the situation. I'm going to provide some screenshots of the reviews if you guys are interested to read them, because some of them are pretty creepy to say the least. I had my first real boyfriend when I was in high school, and we stayed together all the way till uni, and when we both started working, a few months into both of our first jobs, we started drifting apart and getting into plenty of arguments, but we still did not call it quits, probably because neither of us really had the heart to. As I started to get to know my colleagues, I found myself spending more time with them and less with my boyfriend. And part of my group of colleagues was an older guy. I was 20 at the time and he was 37, and he was pretty good looking but serious and quiet, probably just because he had just joined the company as well. But one day, he starts messaging me for work-related stuff, and when we started talking about other stuff, pretty soon we were chatting quite frequently. To be fair, I would say that there was mild flirting going on, but it was mostly just getting to know each other. My relationship with my boyfriend didn't improve too, and one morning before work, he decides to break it off. I was super distraught at work, panicking and realizing that I wasn't ready to end the relationship yet. My colleagues decided to take me out after work for drinks to calm me down, and I did drink quite a lot. I'm not really a drinker though, so getting drunk is pretty easy, albeit rare for me. I couldn't really drive in that sort of condition, so the older guy volunteered to drive me home. Everyone else starts to leave, and soon it's just the 2 of us in the bar. I tell him that I want to leave already because it was getting late, and I actually wanted to go home and talk to my boyfriend about getting back together, but he convinces me to drink a couple more, which I stupidly do. The rest of the night remains a bit of a haze, as I really don't remember what happened after that, but all I know is that I woke up the next morning in an unknown hotel, naked, next to the older guy. He wakes up with a smile and begins to dreamily tell me about how we made love passionately and so on. Honestly, I'm filled with horror because I just couldn't remember a lot of things from the night before. All I can remember was crying the whole night, and I do recall telling him repeatedly that I really wanted to go home, but till today, it's all just a frustrating blur. I start crying, and he panics and drives me back to my parents' house. Before I get down from the car, he leans over to kiss me on the lips, but I avoid him and just rush out. A few minutes later, I receive a text from him telling me how much fun we had and how much he was in love with me. I was really creeped out and told him that I wasn't ready for another relationship, but we could stay friends, if he liked. I was really young and naive, I know. After that, he would text me multiple times a day, even at work, telling me how much he loved me. I tried my best to avoid him, but I didn't tell anyone about what happened, so I couldn't stop him from coming along to our colleague outings or anything. I began to dread those as well, because he would always try to sit next to me during meals or meetings and would quietly slip his hand under the table to stroke my thighs and crotch. In fact, once, when it was just the 2 of us in the office elevator after work, he suddenly pushed me back and started kissing me, and it only stopped when I pushed him away, making excuses that I was worried that we might get caught by others. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't just leave or tell somebody, but I was really young and it was my first job, and I really didn't want people knowing that I slept with this stranger at work. I was just so stupidly conscious of being labelled a slut, and this whole thing goes on for a few more months because of this, and I never did anything while he continued. I eventually reconciled with my boyfriend, and we soon moved back in together, and I never told him about the older guy. When older guy found out that I was back with my boyfriend, that's when the shit started to get crazy. He found out where we lived, and I would catch his car across the street many nights, and he would stay in his car all the way till morning. On weekends, when we would go out for meals, I would suddenly see his car parked where we were eating, or he would suddenly be seated behind us in the same cinema. He even followed us to church once, and that still gives me the chills because I had not expected that one at all. He seemed to just appear in the most random places, so to me it just felt as though I couldn't escape him both at work and outside of work. I was always constantly looking over my shoulder, but just never confronted him because I didn't want my boyfriend to find out. Older guy kept telling me about how passionate I was during our night together, that I soon became scared that I really had acted that way and didn't want my boyfriend to find out and leave me. Although I'm pretty sure that I was too drunk to be anywhere near as passionate as he described. His messages and phone calls became more frequent too, and I was so scared of the whole thing coming out in the open, so I would reply to his texts and calls, which mainly consisted of him breaking down on the phone, demanding that I leave my boyfriend and all his undying love declarations and stuff. I then found out, a few weeks later, that I was pregnant with my boyfriend's child. We were, of course, happy and decided to have a small wedding, in fact. When older guy found out, he became convinced that the child was his. Mind you, the timeline made that impossible. So he started cornering me at work, telling me that he loves me and his child, about how much he loves our child and that he would marry me, that he was already planning to get a new home for us and that he already had the perfect name for our child, etc. The final straw was when he suddenly showed up at my front door with a ring and hysterical about wanting to marry me. Thankfully, my boyfriend wasn't home at that time. I was honestly just really scared, but I managed to put him off telling him that I would really think about it, and he demanded a kiss, for which I gave him just so that he would go away. That incident really freaked me out, so I finally just decided to tell another male colleague about this, and he went to talk to the older guy and try to get him or threaten him to stop his bullshit. I just couldn't take the pressure of dealing with the older guy anymore, so I also decided to quit my job. He didn't stop messaging me though and showing up at random places, and my home too, but thankfully we moved to a new place after our wedding. Thankfully, he didn't crash the wedding reception as it was held in another state. I took the opportunity to change my phone number as well, but he resorted to emailing me poetry and long emails about still wanting to be together, but I was so far removed from him that I could just ignore him now. Thankfully, he seemed to give up after that too. My male colleague informed me that the older guy decided to migrate to another country due to being so heartbroken. Well, not like I cared or anything, mind you. And life went on after that. I had my child, whom I loved to death, and a fulfilling marriage with my boyfriend, now husband. That was until I attended my former colleague's wedding, and there he was. I felt my heart drop to the floor, but tried not to show it because I had my husband and child with me. We were seated on the same table the whole night too, and I just caught him staring at me many times throughout the night. The worst was when I left to go to the bathroom and then returned to see him cradling my baby in his arms. He had asked my husband if he could hold the baby and kept snuggling against my child. I quickly took my child away from him and told my husband that I wanted to leave early as I wasn't feeling well. My husband did ask who the older guy was, but I brushed him off by telling him that it was some old colleague that I never really spoke to at work. Nothing happened after that until I suddenly received a text message a few days later from a random number asking how I was going. I asked who it was, and I got a reply telling me that it was him. I ignored the message, and the next day, I just changed my number again. I still receive random emails and texts from him over the years, and I've changed my number so frequently. My husband, friends, family have questioned me about that too, but I usually make up some excuse. But thankfully, besides that, nothing else has happened. It's been a few years now since the very last message, and I do get nightmares every once in a while of him suddenly appearing again, and I do get paranoid about him showing up sometimes, and find myself checking the surrounding cars on him out and whatnot. But the most recent thing that I heard about him was when my male colleague messaged me a few months ago to let me know that he'd been messaging the guy to ask his opinion if there was still a chance of us getting back together again. So, I wish I could somehow erase that nightmarish year out of my life, but what's done is done, and I just wish this older guy would just leave me and my family alone. So back in 2015, I had the choice of getting a dog and getting a smartphone. I'd never had a dog in my life, or a decent phone, come to think of it, and I'd been saving up for a phone anyhow, so naturally, I picked the dog. My dad knew a fella who had a couple of border collies that had recently had a litter, so we drove out and the dude gave us the last pup. And so, enter Bailey, and a couple of weeks after, he got his shots and I started walking him. Well, my parents figured that I was going to be hanging out at the local park with my new pup, so I could get him socialized, but no. I chose to take him around the perimeter of a nearby farm to keep the farm dog in him. I'd been sneaking out to this farm for years. The farmer was actually an old family friend. My uncles had grown up working for him, so I knew if I was ever caught that I could just drop their name. On the other side of the farm, there was some thick woodland which no one had ever given me any reason to be wary of. But thinking back on it, they probably should have. So, it's a sunny afternoon and it had been pouring down all week, and Bailey was itching for a good walk. I take him to the farm at our usual time, and we start making our way around the woods on the east side of the farm. Everything is quiet, but Bailey keeps darting away from me to explore. He's a puppy, and it's what they do, but, of course, I've been calling his name all the way around the field. We're about halfway past the woods, and I could see the roof of the farmhouse over the next hill. Bailey's been pulling the crap out of the bushes all the way along, and I just got him into trouble for rolling into a pile of fox crap. And that's when I hear a man's voice calling my dog by his name. Like, this dude that I didn't even know was calling my dog by name. I knew it wasn't the farmer too, because I'd met him at a family event, like a barbecue and wedding and stuff like that. So I knew what this guy's voice sounded like. I go completely silent, but the guy keeps calling on my dog. It sounds like he's deep into the woods and maybe moving. He's calling my dog with an excited tone in his voice too, which is kind of what creeps me out the most. Bailey, meanwhile, is completely ignoring this guy and sniffing the now flat pile of poo. Now, I'm like a tiny 18-year-old girl, and the most combat experience that I've ever had was a month learning Taekwondo when I was 11. And I don't have a mobile phone or anything. In other words, if that guy is sinister and finds out where I am, I'm pretty much fucked. Or if Bailey decides to go in after him, then I'm double fucked because I'm not letting a possible psycho get his hands on my puppy. I can either run to the farm, which isn't too far away, or run back through the field towards home. I pick up my dog and sprint across the field. And behind me, I hear someone emerge from the woods, but I'm already over the fence and sprinting back home with my puppy tucked under my arm, and I get home and tell my mum, and she just brushes it off as some weird drunk guy. A few weeks later, I'm at my uncle's house and the farmer walks in. I told my uncle what had happened, so he brings it up, and the farmer asks exactly which woods that I'd been close to and that some of his clothes had gone missing from his washing line recently. He'd put it down to strong winds, but now he wasn't so sure. I take him and my uncle to the exact spot the next day, and all three of us go in, and I find a completely wrecked campsite. There's no clothes or anything, but the tent has collapsed in on itself. There's no fire, but there are some empty gas canisters like you'd use for a portable stove, and empty packets of food scattered everywhere. We eventually report it to the police, but nothing ever really comes from it. Except that I got a phone not long after this, and now I keep it on me wherever I go. So, to tell this story, we need to jump back about 3.5 years ago. I was a senior in college and living with my boyfriend, one of my best friends, and another really good friend, and his girlfriend in a fairly large house that we were renting near campus. Since we had an entire house and not just a small apartment, a lot of parties ended up happening at our place. Living in a college town, it was natural to have people at a college party that you may not even know personally, but they were maybe a friend of a friend or something. So, if ever I saw someone that I didn't recognize or know at our house during one of the parties, I never gave it too much thought. On one particular night, I was pretty tired, so I went up to my room and ditched the party and got into my bed to watch Friends by myself. My room was pretty big, and on one side was the entrance to walk past the other bedrooms, go down the stairs and into the living room. On the other side of the room was a door that led to the garage. If you open the door, there's a sketchy sort of a floor panel. I'm really not sure what else to call it, but it's not by any means something strong enough where you should jump on it or anything. And I'd be careful having too many people stand on it for fear that the wood would break and everyone could fall quite a distance, maybe about 8 feet or so. There was a ladder that led up to this platform, so if for some reason you were ever near the garage and needed to come into my room without going all the way around, you could come up this ladder and through the door. At the bottom of the ladder was another door that was one of the entrances to the kitchen. Anyways, I was hanging out and watching Friends when this guy came up to my bedroom door. He was clearly drunk, college-aged, skinny, brown hair, and wearing really billowy orange MC Hammer pants. And even though he had that creepy drunken emptiness look in his eyes, I didn't think much of him coming up here. So I asked him what's up, and he told me that he was just exploring the house and was curious as to where the other door in my room led. He said he loved learning about how rooms connect to one another and the basic ins and outs of the houses that he goes to. I know, it's a real weird explanation, and I probably should have seen it as a red flag, but didn't. I said something along the lines of, "Oh, that door goes to the garage, which is entered in through the kitchen. But I'm going to bed, so good night." And he went back downstairs. Again, I didn't know who this guy was, and nor had I seen him before, but he didn't really look threatening or anything, so I let it slip. And at the time, I had a house full of people downstairs, so I felt safe anyway. And so eventually, I just fell asleep. But it must have not been too long before I felt someone in my bed stroking my stomach. I figured it was my boyfriend and tried to fall back to sleep. But the stroking continued, and something in my mind just said that this doesn't feel like my boyfriend's touch. Not only did it not feel like him, but it was like I was being stroked slightly with a single fingernail or something. And my boyfriend didn't have long fingernails either, as he trimmed them on a regular basis, for hygienic purposes, but also for his job. So I did what my instincts told me to do, which was to run my hands through the person's hair. And it was at that point that my heart sank. My boyfriend had really long hair and always wore it in a ponytail or bun. This person in my bed, however, had very short hair. My next thought was, what the hell, Cole? Cole is one of my friends that I was living with at the time, and he has short hair, and I wouldn't put it past him to get drunk enough to climb in bed and try to cuddle or something. I got up quickly but calmly, peeling him off me, and they're trying to pull me back, but not saying a word in doing so. No words were being said at all, and this was all happening in the pitch black of my room, mind you. I finally made it up and headed downstairs to tell Cole's girlfriend that, for some reason, her boyfriend is in my bed and to please try and get him out. As I walked downstairs, however, again, I felt my heart drop into my stomach as I saw Cole sitting on the couch with his girlfriend laughing. Thinking that he somehow played a trick on me, being in a half-sleep daze and thus not connecting the dots, I asked if he was just in my bed, to which he looked genuinely confused, obviously. We both looked towards the staircase, and at that moment, who comes strolling down but the guy with the orange MC Hammer pants? I immediately told my boyfriend and fled back up to my room, and various friends and my boyfriend were trailing behind trying to get more information. As I get to my room and flick on the light, I see that the door going to the garage is opened, meaning I had literally told him how to get into my room without anyone noticing. I frantically told my boyfriend and our good friend Austin what had happened. Austin ran downstairs after this guy who was just on his way out of the door, and what they told me after coming back upstairs has haunted me ever since. The guy turned around to face Austin, and Austin could see that the guy had his hand fumbling around in his giant pants pockets. After a few angry back and forths and some questioning, Austin got him to the ground, only to find that this guy had a knife in his pocket. And no, not a pocket knife, but a giant kitchen knife from our kitchen. In other words, when I felt a single sharp fingernail grazing my stomach, it was not a single sharp fingernail. It was a knife. Austin proceeded to punch the guy in the face before coming upstairs to tell me what had happened. And for the rest of the night after that, and many nights after that, I proceeded to feel scared out of my mind that he was going to come back through the garage. The following day, I made my boyfriend put a deadbolt on that door. I still get scared to sleep alone at night and make sure to have all entrances and exits on lockdown, especially because I've actually seen that guy walking down the street or at the bar multiple times after this incident. And to be honest, I don't think he even recognizes who I am anymore. I'm just a nameless, almost victim. But what makes me sick to my stomach, even more so, is that I found out a few months later that I was about a month pregnant at the time this all happened. It really does terrify me to this day to think of what could have happened if I just hadn't have gotten up and ran downstairs. Oh, and by the way, when I asked who the hell invited this guy over, no one knew who he was, and he was just some sort of total stranger. But even weirder, he came with a friend that night, who no one knew either. And the next day, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, and guess who waltzes into our house but this guy's friend? I asked, "Hello, can I help you?" And he said that I forgot something here last night. Walks into our pantry and comes out with a paper bag and just walks out the front door. To this day, I have no idea what was inside that bag.